Welcome to another episode of Keeping Up with APID. This is our third episode. Super excited to be doing this again. My name is Chris Yang. I'm the director of the Mosaic Cross-Cultural Center, current chair of the APID Task Force. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I'll start with what I'm eating today for lunch. I won't show it to the camera right now, but I have a picture that I'll just cut in. It's like in Mandarin, it's called nurofen. It's like a braised pork belly, like gravy that you put over like rice. And then I threw in some kimchi in there too, just so I have some vegetables. Let's see. Let's go to Sharon next.
Hi everyone, I'm Sharon. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the program coordinator for Mosaic Cross-Cultural Center. And I am eating pad thai, which is actually from a restaurant because I don't know how to make it. It's from a restaurant called Lana Thai. It's located on Camden. Support your local Asian businesses, especially during COVID. So many of our restaurants in our neighborhoods are having to close. So if you have the funds, please support. And also you get to feed your belly. And I'll pass it to Pro.
Once again, I did not wait for the podcast, so I'll be submitting my picture. Thank you. I did take a picture again today.
Wait, Parl, tell people what it is. Describe it.
Okay, I had dal and rice for lunch today, and I had char with it, which is like a pickle. It's kind of like a spicy pickle. It's like my favorite thing. I don't eat a single meal without it. And I'll submit a picture now. Thank you.
Let's go to Jeannie.
Hi, my name is Jeannie, pronoun she, her, hers. Today my lunch is a bit sad, but there's a reason why it's sad. So I'm eating Nature Valley Packed Sustain Energy Bar, almond butter, and blueberry flavor. We'll even do this nice hand background thing. But the reason why is because I'm meeting up later and I'm getting a Vitality Bowl after this with my friends. So, of course, with mask and social distancing, so no worries. And maybe I might just eat some of my Trader Joe's ghost pepper chips that aren't even spicy. That's all. Okay, thanks. Signing out and passing it to.
Hi y'all, my name is Anoop, pronoun she, her, hers. Currently serve as the AS Director of Academic Affairs, honorary part of the APID Task Force. Today, same disclaimer as always, my mom made my food. She made, the story goes, she made like potato bell pepper yesterday, and I was like, ew, I don't want to eat it. Okay, I don't really like vegetables, and I'm vegetarian, it's fine. And then, so I asked her to make rajma chol today. So it's just rajma chol with some green chili, some onions, and that's me. Also, I have a cool shirt on. I have a shirt from WongFu Productions. Go support them. It says Remodel Minority.
Yeah, shout out to WongFu. They came to San Jose State last year.
2 years ago. I had chicken wings with one of them.
Yeah,
WongFu, amazing. I love them.
Mm-hmm.
Like most of us were in the VIP too, right?
Most of us did what?
There.
Oh, like there was like a VIP session right before.
Mm-hmm.
You were there, right, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
Sharon?
Yeah.
That's why I say chicken wings, because they had really good chicken wings that day.
Yeah. I was there, and I think the table that I sat at just like super tried to be like, you talk to Wes. You talk to Wes, because I love Wes. I think he's like super artistic, cute. But I was like, no, this is supposed to be a session with the students. I just sat there because there was no other space. And I mean, it was fine. I just said hello, but like everyone, I don't know if you were at my, or someone was at my, was Anoop? Were you at my table?
I was.
Yeah. So thanks, Anoop, for that.
It was actually really funny because I'm gonna put Sharon on blast here. She like was so scared of asking for a picture, and like would not ask for a picture. And I finally had to just be like, Wes, can you take a picture of Sharon?
Wait, before I found out that they were coming, I found out on Twitter, right? And then I was like, oh my God, what is what I like retweeted of something of like Wes or something or WongFu, and then Wes responded to me and he said, oh my God, yeah. And then he was like, hope to see you there or something like that. I still have that tweet saved somewhere, and I just wanted to see, I wish like he came back because I had class that day, and so I couldn't go. I was so mad. I was thinking about DITCHING my class, but then I didn't want to because then I could have like missed something important because it's one of those like classes where it's once a week, so it's quite sad.
Don't
be a responsible student. Go to your classes.
Yeah, go to class.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. That's a good segue. So speaking of attractiveness, so our topic today that everyone wanted to talk about, which I think is a good topic to talk about, we're going to be talking a little bit about healthy relationships and a little bit about attractiveness. I think as an APID community, this is something that like we have some mixed messages around. Like there's certain things that don't get said in the way that we're raised when it comes to relationships. There's certain things that we're forced to learn on our own for various reasons. And then there's certain ways in which society views Asian like body types and Asian and perceive Asian like identity. So like so we're going to be trying to talk about some of that stuff. So I don't know if anybody like wants to start with the conversation around like healthy relationships. And if we need a jumping off point, I know some of y'all have been watching the summer smash hit of Netflix, Indian Matchmaking, and have like things to say about that show.
I have so much to say. Okay. My parents had a love marriage. My mom married outside her ethnicity. So that was like a whole taboo thing to do. I don't know. My grandparents on my mom's side, like I love them, but then also they're kind of very traditional and they're like, keep the Jet blood running true. And Jet is a caste in Punjab. That's farmers. And so that was like, so she had a love marriage. And then, so we were actually watching the show together. And she was like, oh my God, I hate how, she was like, at one point, Seema goes, oh, you either call it love marriage or marriage. And marriage just means arranged marriage. You don't have to put arranged in front of it. That's just assumed. My mom was like, what? No, that's not true. That wasn't my experience with it. Anyways, my mom got very upset at that show and we stopped watching it because she was like, half of these things are not how our culture is. Like they're blowing it out of proportion. That being said, she told me about the story about how my uncle was married by putting like a little newspaper ad in India Post. And so like the newspaper ad had all of the traits that Seema was listing, like tall, it had caste, it had fair skinned, comes from this family, wants this type of girl. So I was like, I mean, there must be a little truth in it. So yeah, I had a mixed experience.
Okay, I'll go. Well, if we're gonna talk about like what our parents and our families like, obviously the older generation of my family, they all got arranged. So it was fixed for all of them, like every single one. And then some of the families that came here now, their kids ended up like having interracial. Wait, is that how you call it? Interracial marriages. So it's like different races. It works out. It has worked out for our family fine, as long I feel like the family's criteria is just if they're as educated. Like education is a really big deal in my family, so like it's fine if they intermarry as long as the person that they're marrying has some kind of high status or is educated really well or does really well financially. So that's kind of how it's been working. Kind of interesting.
I can go next. I think personally for my family, even my grandparents, I feel like they're all very open-minded. I don't feel like my grandparents look for specific things for like their daughters or son when they're looking for like marriages and stuff like that. Because even personally for my parents, they're not necessarily like a love marriage, but they were getting to a point where they're like, oh, we should probably start a family. And they just kind of settled with someone that they found like, oh, I could like start a life with. Because my parents met through mutual friends, right? And then a lot of my cousins, they all married by like their love, like they found love through like college or like work or like something like that. So I don't necessarily feel like I have that pressure, but I guess like an ongoing joke that I told you all like last time is that my mom's always like, try not to date until like after you graduate from college and things like that. And now that I'm here, I'm like, why am I still single? Where's my boyfriend at? And like my mom constantly like jokes around. Like she's like, oh, have you checked out like blah blah blah's like son, like one of her friends, like son or something? She's like, oh, they're cute. And then I'm like, yeah, they're cute, whatever. And then like, yeah, I ask my mom all the time now, where's my boyfriend at? But it's like a joke and like I know my time will come, but like it's just funny to me. But yeah, I don't feel like I have that like mentality where I feel pressure to have to find a partner in a specific like category or like specific thing. I think my parents prefer like Asians just because like they can communicate with them in that way, but like otherwise my parents don't really care. So I got kind of lucky.
So I wanted to add also, like, I personally don't have any experiences with arranged marriages. I don't think um anybody in my previous generation did either. So my parents or aunts or uncles. Um, but I did want to throw in there just as a overall disclaimer, um, that there are cultures where arranged marriages are more normal, and there are cultures where arranged marriages are super not normal. And in both those types of cultures, there's this attitude of like one's better than the other. And I just want to make it very clear, we do not think one is better than the other. Like there are positives and negatives for both arranged and non-arranged marriages, and really it's just about trying to find a healthy relationship that works for you. So like this is not meant to be an indictment on arranged marriages, this is not meant to be an indictment on non-arranged marriages. Like either are fine.
Yeah, I think that, I think starting what Anoop started off with is, you know, in my experience, I've had family members, cousins who've had arranged marriages, and some who've had marriages, based on dating and going through the whole, like maybe what is considered the Western process, right? Of dating people and figuring out compatibility and what works, what doesn't. But I think what, Anoop shared in the beginning was when there's like a checklist that's associated with how the family views a person's like potential partner, and how that can be toxic, because then you're just really breaking down someone based on whether they meet certain criteria, right? And some of it is very it's based on historical issues between different races, right? So it's very easy then to look at someone and be like, oh yeah, they're attractive for this caste, right? Or they're, and or yeah, they could meet, but they obviously don't have the educational level to like be married into our family, right? And so when you start having people kind of uh, taken off the potential list of suitors based on some of these criteria, then I think is like, how are we establishing boundaries for the person, right? Who's, I mean, ultimately, like, it's those two people who are going to be married, right? And they're going to be living their life. But then I think there's going to be like the fact that it's almost like your parents or your family chose, right? And sometimes you don't really get an opportunity to like, if to voice your own concerns or wants, then I think, there's like a big issue. And that even comes to like dating, right? Like how Jeannie said, like, oh yeah, my mom points out like so and so friend family's son is really like cute, and someone can point that out, but if it goes beyond that, then I'm like, wait, like, like I remember when I was single, like someone tried to set me up on a blind date, and they were like, you know, kind of listing off like all these things about him, and I was just like, okay, I don't care that he works at Google and, you know, is tall. Like, is he nice? Like, what is he into? How do you know him? Right? Like, I think that goes more into like the personality. And I think that's where I see the like disconnect and the unhealthiness maybe.
Building off of that, I think it's kind of like a cultural thing as well because it's different from, I don't know if it's like Western style, but like an Indian style, I don't know, Indian culture. Um, like you live with the family. So like back in India, like my grandparents live with my uncle's wife and their family, and then also my other uncle's wife and their family. So like it's a collective household. And so that's why they're like, oh, will this person fit into our household? Will they listen to the patriarch or the matriarch of the family? So that's like the cultural part. But like then there's like that toxic mentality that, you know, the girl has to leave her house and um, she's no longer part of the household. Um, that my mom herself experienced, but like in a different way.
Oh, I feel like my family has that too, like the idea that like once your daughter like marries somebody, they technically leave the family. So that's actually really interesting to see how that connects too. But I think the only like unhealthy like part of it, I guess, about like the whole relationship and like the standards of like relationships for my family within like what I know is that like for example, like my mom doesn't require me to marry like somebody like super rich or things like that, but she definitely has qualities that she would like me to marry, but she doesn't force that upon me. Like she would like me to marry someone who makes enough money to like have a like decent living standard, but like she doesn't require me to marry someone like working from Google, like a CEO or something like that. So it's like,
What I was gonna add to that whole like girl leaving the house thing, I think it's because like historically, when the girl got married, she would leave and go like really, really far to like the next village or, you know. So when she leaves her town, her family's like, okay, we've lost our daughter now. So like, that's why if you've ever noticed in some Indian wedding ceremonies, um, there's like this whole part, like, you know, our thing is a couple days. So there's like this whole part where like the girl, there's like a literally a ceremony where the girl's leaving her house. Like the guy has to go do all this ridiculous stuff to get the girl to leave. Like it's like a whole challenge thing. And as the girl comes to the car or whatever, like her whole family's crying, she's crying because the girl's leaving the house.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why we still like hold on to that like mentality so much. But am I gonna be crying if I have a wedding? Hell yeah, that's gonna be me crying. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I got married 3 years ago, 2 years ago. Oops. And our we didn't get married from our home because typically in Indian weddings you get married from like our home or a temple, right? But we didn't do that. We were at a resort. It worked out better. And you know, we did that part, but like I didn't cry at all at my wedding. I cried at the reception because my cousin started to cry. I don't know. But it's interesting, right? Like some of these traditional aspects to the wedding ceremony, right? It's very like I don't know why we hold on to it, but maybe like a lot of it does have like the ceremony attached to it, and that becomes like part of the like lineage of continuing on, right? And I can see like maybe that's why it carries on, but um you know, for the longest time, you know, my mom's generation, the daughters never got the last name of their fathers. They were given the last name Devi, which means goddess. So it's like when your daughter gets married to a different household, you're literally like giving a goddess, you know. And so my mom didn't have, my mom and her sisters didn't have her dad's last name. They had like a different name. And it wasn't until my generation, I was one of the first daughters that my dad had. Well, I'm his only daughter. What do I mean? Like in my dad's side of the family, I was the first daughter to be born. And my dad, I have my dad's last name, and it's really important to me, right? Because he could have easily kind of kept up the tradition and had my last name be Devi as well. But I mean, I think it's all about like reflection and like thinking like what are some of these traditions that make sense and some of it like just doesn't, right? And I think my dad just has never really wanted to follow the rules. So and even after getting married, like I've kept my last name because I think it's really significant and important to me to know that, my mom didn't get to do that. She didn't have a choice. Neither did her sisters, and so many other generations of women, right? Probably didn't get a choice in really feeling like they were part of the family until they got married and had maybe worth of having their husband's last name. So I think it's really important to like evaluate that. And even when I was getting married, I remember talking to my partner, like, do you want me to have your last name? Is that important to you? And he was like, no, like I can't think of you being any other name except for Sharon Singh, and I think that it's important for men, I didn't watch the show Indian Matchmaking on Netflix, but I've watched clips of it on Instagram, right, on IGTV, and it's very interesting because you see clips of the guys kind of just being like, so like, do you cook, right? And like those questions that are very much upholding the patriarchy, and at what point do we have to have both people who are like being part of this process really break down and ask different questions and really evaluate for themselves, like, do I want a partner or do I want to just kind of keep my family happy? And I think that requires reflection. I think it's starting to happen too, right? Like Anoop, your mom was like, this is dumb, like this is not my experience, this is not how it is. And sometimes there's pain in changing these like traditional ceremonial aspects to our culture.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's important to name that, like, a big reason why a lot of these traditions still exist today is because of patriarchy, right? Like, men are still treated as the class of power. They still are the class with access to power. They're the ones that want to still keep a lot of these traditions going. And even if it's not an outright like tradition, like the implications and the meanings behind a lot of those things, men are still trying to keep going, right? So like, this idea of like taking someone's last name or whatever, it's like it's still in the world today. Outside of, I guess there probably are a couple exceptions, although I can't think of any. It's the majority of the world today still like if it's a marriage between a guy and a girl, the girl's the one that drops her last name, right? And like either takes on her husband's name, or it's treated as like an abnormality if she doesn't, right? And like it becomes a topic of conversation of like, oh, you chose not to. And it's not, it's very rarely the case that like either both people changed their names to something totally different than what it was before, or that the guy changes his name to the girl's last name. And like you can say that that's a traditional thing, but like it's also like an enforcement of patriarchy.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And there is a new trend that's coming out, right? As part of like this ever evolving society that we live in, where like new families are making their own last names, like by joining last names or just coming up with a brand new one, right? And I think that's really cool if that's something that you're interested in, right? Like I remember like when I was getting married, my mom even was like, why don't you want to change your name, right? So it is also like, as much as like my mom is like a modern woman, right? Like she like was still like questioning why I wasn't thinking even about it. And then like even my mother-in-law, right, like she kept her last name after she got married as well, but she was always like, yeah, it is harder when you travel with everyone, right, like just on a practical sense. And so, you know, but I wonder then, like, why is it, like, why are there like questions, right, like when my mom travels or travel with my brother and I, right, she would always get questioned like, are they your kids? Like, why don't you have the same last name? And so she's actually kept my dad's last name, even though they're divorced, just because it's easier in a lot of their like documents to just have a last name that's like recognized.
So speaking of questions, like I am curious. I want to ask folks and raise this question of like, what like sort of messages did you all grow up with when it concerns like relationships? So like one question would be, what were you explicitly told about relationships, you know? And then the other question would be, what were you explicitly not told about relationships growing up?
I wasn't told anything at all. I still haven't. I don't bring it up in this house. What is boys? I've never heard of them. And I'm 21. So yeah, that's my experience.
Mm, I feel like I've also never been told anything about relationships specifically. I think just growing up, my family, especially my mom and I, we watch a lot of like Asian dramas. And so just like because of that, I've seen relationships, I guess, quote unquote. And like I would just always ask a lot of questions, right? I'll be like, oh my God, mom, guess what? Like her and I are really close. So I always be like, oh my God, guess what? I met this guy out here at school. He's so cute. And then like I would like talk about like all these things. And then she'd be like, just don't date until later on if you can. Like just don't date. And then like I remember my first time ever having a boyfriend. She was like, oh, are you sure you want to do that? Like she was just more concerned of like my academics, I guess. She's just so scared that like being in a relationship will affect my academics, but I feel like I control it pretty well. I could just do my own thing and then also focus on school and stuff. But also at the same time, I don't know if that's true or not. So I just kind of like was like whatever, and it just happens. It happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But like she knows most part of like my tea.
I feel like similar to Jeannie, my mom was like, become a doctor. Like that's your life plan. Don't get any distractions, like distractions including boys. Like that's it. That was the end. Um, but I am like right now in one, and like she's been pretty supportive. She's like, I don't know about this, but you know, do what you gotta do. But like, um, definitely my whole life, it wasn't spoken about. Um, it was definitely like just like I grew up with three older siblings, so they kind of had to break the barriers before I had to break the barriers. So I don't have as much hardship as everybody else. I feel, and I feel lucky in that. Mostly, I just heard education comes first, and then everything else in your life comes second. Well, education and health. My mom's really big on like staying healthy because my family. Yeah.
Wait, I have a quick question to just add on for everybody. Growing up, did your parents ever like ask you, like your friends that are like of a different gender than you, like, hey, is that your boyfriend or is that your girlfriend? Because I feel like my mom and my dad, they always peep at who I hang out and they're like, is that your boyfriend? Wait, do you like him? And then I'll have to be like, no, mom, no, dad, that's just my friend. Like, has that ever happened to you all too?
Yeah, definitely. Like I I didn't explicitly get the thing of like this is what a relationship looks like, right? I don't think my parents were the greatest model. Um and then, you know, but definitely getting the like, don't go near boys, don't talk to boys, really, like you don't, it's not important. Like I think it's like boys aren't important in your life right now. Like it doesn't need to be part of the conversation unless it's a important thing, and it's not. And you know, I think there was definitely those like questions of like, do you like someone? Like my mom is very cool too, and we are very close. But you know, in high school, I think I was just like, I don't know, moody teenager, like total brat to my mom. And then I remember when I was in college, like she was just like, "Are you dating? Like you don't really." I don't really see you with boys. I don't really see you talking about boys. And I remember one time she asked me, she's like, "Are you a lesbian? Because you tend to hang out more with women." And I was just like, I don't have to answer that. And I don't think I did. Because it was just like, regardless, right? Like, I just don't think I need to tell everybody about my business. So I think there's like, you know, I think it's like the reality, like when you're growing up, right? It's like it's not important, but then at a certain age, they're like, so what's going on? Like, you know, where are you? And I think especially like when I started dating my partner, my husband, you know, it was definitely, I told my mom like, hey, I'm going on this date. And she was like, okay, sure, yeah. And it wasn't until like, you know, 3 years into the relationship that, you know, we decided like, yeah, this makes sense. We like want to be together. Then I started introducing him to my family. And I think that's when my mom was like, okay, like I don't have to worry. Like you got it figured out. Um, but that was my experience.
Did you know that that was going to be your partner for life when you first started dating him? Like I'm curious, you know, like or you're like, yes, that's the one I'm going to marry, mom. Or were
Um,
you like,
I think very early on, so like all throughout, like I wasn't the type of person who like dreamt about getting married and like having a family, like even when I was younger or like, you know, in high school or college. I think I just had really bad examples of marriage in my life, right? And then I remember like people would be like, so what are your goals in life? And I was like, I don't know. I just want to like have like a job that I'm really passionate about, have a dog, you know, I'll live at home. Like that was my whole thing. I was just like, I'm always gonna live at home. I can't afford to live in the Bay Area by myself. And I just want a dog, right? And so yeah, getting married was not part of my plan. But I remember like about like 3 or 4 months into dating my husband, it felt like we had known each other like forever. And I think it was because like when we first started talking and dating, he never flirted with me. He never tried to like put any moves. He didn't try to hold my hand. Like he was very respectful and he was just trying to get to know me. Because I remember our very first conversations, like he was like, so what are your goals in life? Like, you know, those like really like hard hitting questions, right? And like going back and forth, and there just wasn't anything about like um you know, there was just none of that. And I think when you have a basis of like respect and like getting to know each other and friendship really, then um it and then it evolves into something else. It just feels like, oh, like I kind of feel like this is different, and I didn't have that before.
wow, I'm mind blown right now.
Well,
Wow, just asking advice for future self, you know,
yeah.
single Pringle
No,
out here, but
I mean, I totally get that, Jeannie. I think you know one of the things about not having these conversations with your parents is that a lot of us are just kind of left in the dark about like all these questions we have, right? I do want to say too though that like as far as like relationships go, you know, I think Sharon's right about the basis of respect. And I think it's important to remember that that's going to look differently for different people, right? Like, you know, I think one of the things that we have done harm in our society around understanding relationships is like the creation of like, you know, like expectations or rules or whatever, right? Like this idea of like, well, you know, if you don't, like, you can't sleep with someone on the first date, otherwise, like, you know, then you don't respect yourself or you don't respect them. and you can't like, you can't meet their parents too early because otherwise you're going too far too fast, and all this stuff. Like all of those like kind of rules, I think, create like unnecessary like friction. It's like you we have to start trusting ourselves and our own instincts and how we like interact with folks, and we can't let like rules be like the way that we see relationships, if that makes sense.
And I think Chris, completely agree. And I think it's also as much as like knowing the rules for yourself, like what your expectations are for yourself, what you're comfortable with. But also, if you can't have that conversation with someone else and like agree and find some common ground, then like what are we doing here? And I think that's the part that I realized very like as I reflect as an adult, that like we were never taught those skills of how to understand expectations about what we're looking for, how to verbalize it, and then how to like negotiate and think through a lot of these things, right? And the question I have that comes up as I reflect a lot about any relationship, really, right? Like friendship and love, and like how do you all think that the messages that you got early on in your childhood have led to how you create relationships now?
Just because, well, I'm just gonna put this for a record. I've never had a boyfriend, so I don't really know what I'm talking about because brown boys continue to fail me as a person continuously. Yes, I am bitter. Um,
Call them out. Shout
yeah,
their names out.
big fail, big fail. Like, oh my god. Even as friends, just wow. I just have to say it. And then so like I feel like even as I'm growing up, like it was really hard for me to be like vulnerable around my parents because we didn't talk about feelings. Like that's just something we never talked about. And I feel like my dad wanted us to be like kind of scared of him, like as we grow up. Because I think that's the Indian dad thing. They want you to be like, they want you to respect and listen to them, and their way of doing that is out of fear. Now we're cool, but when I was growing up I was like afraid of my dad, and then my mom was always working, so we just didn't talk about feelings. So I've noticed that like even when I try, like I just can't be vulnerable to somebody unless I really like they really earn my trust, and that hasn't happened. So yeah, it's kind of bad. I don't know how to fix that.
For me, what I struggled with, even with my partner right now, it's boundaries. I feel like growing up, I wasn't taught how to set those like healthy boundaries. Like, I want you in my life 24/7. I mean, I love you, but no. And then like just like that really toxic, like you have to save me, and I'm nothing without you. Like I don't really, those like very big love statements don't appeal to me at all. I'm like, can we just have what Carl and Ellie had in Up? Like that's what I want in my life. Not the sad parts, like the happy parts, but um, yeah. And I wasn't taught boundaries at all. Like we never even spoke about it in my household. Like to this day, not even like with my siblings or like with my mom. Like I feel like I try to set them now. I try to be like, okay, when I'm in school, like I'm just in school. You can't phone me up with chores, like things like that, because I live at home. But I wish that growing up I was like taught how to not compartmentalize, but like how to um healthily deal with things in my life and not like let something take control over me. Because in high school, that's definitely how I played with relationships. I was like, this is my whole life now. Like, you have to walk me to class and we have to do this together and we have to be together 24/7. And then when I was in college, I was like, no, I can't do that anymore. Like, that's so high school. Yep.
I don't really know exactly. Like, like, honestly, like, for the record, I'm also a very single Pringle too. And, like, everyone has failed me to some degree, or I failed them probably, because I'm just dramatic like that right now. But I don't know. I don't know what exactly that, like, I've learned growing up that has caused me to be the way I am in relationships. But I think also, like, just the idea of, like, that perfect person, I think is what always failed me in myself. I think growing up watching like Asian dramas or like just shows in general, like you see a lot of like romance standards and like what a partner standard should look like or feel like, I guess. And so for me, like I feel like in my head I had this checklist that I had hoped that someone that I talk to or like become like romantically involved, that they'll check like all those boxes off. And I think eventually like someone called me out, like one of my friends, like shout out to Sean. He called me out and he was like, you know, like girl, you gotta check yourself. Like ain't nobody in this world is perfect, and like there's not gonna be one person that's gonna check off every single one of your boxes. It's like there's gonna be like a cake, there's gonna be layers to it, you know, like you find what it's important, like your base, and then like you have like all these other things that are like just frostings that are nice things that you would like. So that's what I'm trying to like do, you know. I try to make a list that's more realistic and like just not be so dramatic, I guess, and be more vulnerable. And that's something that they call me out on. So we out here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would agree. I would agree with everything you all said. Like, and it makes me happy to know that you all have that kind of mindset, because like that stuff that like people don't always get their heads around until like later in life. And by then it's a little bit too late to like go back and redo your first relationships and stuff. Um, but like this idea of like there's one person out there that's perfect for you, and it's your like true love and all that stuff, like one true love and all that stuff, like that's all bullshit. Like it's mathematically not a thing. There are too many human beings in the world to believe that you have one true love that you're gonna find in your lifetime. Like it's not a thing, you know. And like I mean, and I don't want to discount love, like, well, and I don't want to discount love. Like the reason why I'm saying that is not because love is a myth, but the reason I'm saying that is because people are afraid to fall in love because they're waiting for their one true love, you know. And it's like, no, like, you know, you can fall in and out of love with people. You can love multiple people. Like you know, you can have, you know, um, you can your love can evolve throughout time, and it's not like, you know, the romanticism around like Disney movies and that kind of stuff, while fun to watch, is not a good model for your life. Like, you know, and you know, for me, I think because, you know, I also never talked about it with my parents. And it's funny because I actually had a totally different experience, but the same result than a lot of you. So part of it might be because I was raised a dude, right? Like, so like, you know, you know, and I had the expectations put on me by my parents, oh, that they would a son, you know. And but then it also led to the same behavior of like I wouldn't tell them about people I was interested in or dates I would go on, because like my fear was that they would take it too seriously. And it was like the minute you tell them like, oh, I'm interested in a girl or something, they'd be like, oh, okay, like this is it, you're gonna get married to this person. And it's like, well, hold on, like, you know, 1 second. Like, like, you know, the purpose of me telling you was not so you can prep my wedding. Like the purpose of me telling you was just to share, right? But like, because there are those expectations, it's like I also did not go to them for advice or anything, you know. And they never said to come to them for advice. They were never like, oh, let me help you out with your love life. Like that was not an open invitation on my parents' side either. So it's like, you know, I also just had to navigate things by myself. And like a lot of that was like seeing media and seeing pop culture and seeing Disney movies and stuff, and then having to like unlearn what I saw, you know, and be like, oh yeah, all that stuff was like kind of bullshit.
I guess, you know, I guess, you know, Chris earlier talked about how like a lot of the rules around marriage and all of that are like, you know, based on maintaining the patriarchy. Like, do you ever, like, has in your family, has it explicitly ever been said though, like this is the type of person that they would want you to date, or your like even other family members, like did you ever see that conversation come up?
I personally was never explicitly told anything around, you know, who to find or what sort of criteria there are um, I also was not told explicitly about a lot of things by my parents. Like it was very much like implicit. And I think even to this day, I think my parents struggled. I think my dad especially struggled with the fact that he was told very explicitly what to do with his life, and he didn't want to do that to me. But then he still had like implicit like goals for me. So like when I didn't meet his goals, it would still like be disappointing for him, right? So like I was never explicitly told I have to be a doctor or whatever. But then like when I told him I wanted to be a teacher, like he was really disappointed, you know? Like so just stuff like that, you know, where it's like I wasn't explicitly told I have to like live my life a certain way, but then whenever my life diverged from that, like they were just really disappointed.
They were like verbally,
Sometimes
like,
verbally, yeah, sometimes verbally, sometimes like not verbally, but you can tell, you know, where they're just like acting a certain
yeah.
way. um for me, you know, in my family, um I think both my parents like understood that like we have to find our own way, like our like my generation, me and my cousins, like they understood that we have to find our own way, but like, you know, they also like kind of had to find their own way a little bit too. I think it might be a historical thing because they were raised, you know, during the time of the communist revolution in China, so like the idea of being historic and traditional and the idea of being new and modern was always like a topic of conversation, I think, and in the forefront of their minds. So, you know, I think them and their generation of folks, none of them really did things the traditional way in, you know, quote unquote, that their parents would have done or their grandparents would have done. So in a sense, I think my generation got a little bit lucky with that, but there's still like expectations that were being held, you know. So like I remember, you know, like like you know, gender roles. When it came to gender roles, like guys are given a lot more allowance than girls, right? Like you're allowed to do a lot more things, and you're given a lot more like privileges. So like, you know, like me and my male friends, we could stay out late, you know, or we could like go out on Friday nights or Thursday nights or whatever. And then like I have female friends who are the same age and the same maturity level who were not allowed to go out, right? So I remember like growing up, there were times in which we would like sneak them out of the house because they'd be like, you know, they'd be like, I'm hostage, I've held hostage. Or we're like, okay, we'll sneak you out. Like, and we had to like come up with these stupid elaborate plans to sneak people out of their houses, you know, where you like park the car like a block away and like, you know, roll up and like without the engine on. And then like, you'd be like, you know, have like codes and stuff. And then
Oh
you'd
my
have to like,
god, you just like
yeah.
reminded me. I was kind of dating this one dude in school, and he used to drive a motorcycle. Don't
Oh
ask.
no.
And his dumb ass, like he was sneaking out, but he turned on his engine too early. My mom caught. Oh, it was bad. It was bad. My mom was really disappointed. But yeah, like the whole like sneaking in, sneaking out thing. Ooh, is
Yeah.
bad.
No, you know, you shift the car to neutral and you let it ride down the driveway and down the street a little bit before you turn it on. You
This
can't
is a pro at this.
like you can't if you're not in the driveway, then you just have to shift it to neutral and get your ass out and push the car. Like because you can't start up the car right next to the house, you know?
Right. That's
You
so
you,
dumb.
you especially cannot
That was
start the
a
car.
sign.
You especially cannot start the car when your headlights are aimed into the house. Like that's dumb. You can't do that anyway. Um, now we're getting deep into things, but like,
Well, I would just like to put it out there. I've never like snuck out the house before.
really,
I feel like I like missed something out of like my whole childhood, like growing up now.
were you told you couldn't go out at night, Jeannie?
Yeah, especially like by myself. My mom's like, "No, you're a girl. Like, don't do that. Like, that's
Mhm,
dangerous, you know?" But like, I don't think I've ever had the want or need to sneak out, or like, I
mhm,
just never thought about sneaking out. I
mhm,
don't know. For the most part, I feel like my parents knew where I was going for the most part, and they like didn't really have like a. Oh, I never had a curfew growing up, so like whenever I were like on a date or whatever, then like it was just like whatever. I just come home.
mhm, mhm.
Interesting. I kind of like was told like, no, you can't go out. It's nighttime.
Yeah, I get threats.
My parents just would ask me like, "Oh, where are you going?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I'm hanging out with a friend." And then like they'd be like, "Oh, going where?" And then I'll just like tell them a brief, like, and then I'll just
Yeah.
skedaddle.
Yeah. I think when I turned 18, I think my parents just kind of were like, well, we like I was never a bad kid, and it's not like I wasn't doing well in school. Like I remember when I turned 18, like my dad was like, okay, like, you know, if you're gonna go out, like if something's going on, just call me. Like I'll come get you.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it was kind of like I don't really want you to do it, like he did say like, tell me and I'll come get you. And I think my mom was straight up just like, no, like you can't drink, you can't go out. Like I think as a single mother, she kind of she felt like she had to, like she wanted to be my friend, but she felt like she had to be my mom first. And I got a lot of mixed messages, and it led to me like, you know, me having like screaming matches with her like around the house, just being like, I hate you, and very much that like Disney original movie child rebelling and fighting with their parent. Like that was me in high school, my mom. And then when I went to my dad's, like I feel like, he was working nights and I was taking care of my little brother. So I would just stay up. I would like, talk on AIM and like on the phone and stuff. Wow. Throwback. And it was just those things where
I got you with AIM. I got you with AIM. I talk to AIM all the time too. None of these kids know, but I do.
I know AIM. I just never used it because it was like the end phase of AIM.
Yeah,
And I
it
hopped
was our
onto a
lifeline. It
computer.
was our lifeline.
Yeah. So it's those things where, I didn't have the structure. Like my mom was like, we don't have soda in this household. Whereas my dad's like, we're gonna eat cupcakes and soda and like have fun, like that was not my dad at all. But like he's like, I don't understand, like why have a little bit, like, moderation. And I think, there's a reason my parents weren't together. And I think growing up I just got that like kind of the best and the worst at the same time in both situations.
Yeah, for me in my family, not I definitely had a couple folks within my family tree who didn't have good relationships. I think we were all pretty lucky that nobody was in a dangerous relationship as far as I know, but like I definitely had an uncle and an aunt both get divorced um within the course of their relationships and stuff. And and the messages around divorce in my family were not super healthy. Like, I think and I don't think this is exclusively an Asian thing. I feel like white folks get this too, and like other cultures get this too. Like the messages around divorce is like it's treated as like a failure, right? Like this is a failure of a relationship, and you failed to keep this relationship going, and like it's got to be somebody's fault, and then you go to court to find out whose fault it is. And the fact of the matter is that like I don't think divorce is like a failure, right? Like I feel like obviously you have to try hard in your relationship, obviously you have to like learn and grow and evolve and develop, but like you also, if you have to get divorced, then you get divorced. Like it's not the end of the world, um and I think like in my family, it was, divorce is seen as like a bad thing. And like once somebody was divorced, like the other person was just out, right? Like once your uncle gets divorced, like your uncle's still part of your family, and then the person who was your aunt is like out, you never see them again. Like nobody acknowledges their name, like no, whatever. And it's like, I think because we don't talk about it, then like that attitude continues, and I think it's important that we talk about these things, because then you have a chance to process and learn from these things, and not just like let things continue the way they are.
Yeah. But I mean, earlier, Chris, you had said, like love love can look like a lot of things, right? And one of the things you said is like love can evolve. And I don't think that concept in South Asian culture has ever really been explicitly talked about. Like, I feel like once you're married, like you're married, like there's never any conversations of like how you as a couple are going to grow and evolve, right? Like they see your family unit grow if you have kids, and that's a change. But they never like there's never any conversations like once you get married, like the first 2 years, like you can expect some of these things, right? And then 10 years, you can expect some of these things, right? And 15, like none of that gets talked about. Like you're together, you're together. Oh, you got divorced? Whose fault is it? Right? And I think that's like causing a lot of harm, because then I think the shame and the guilt, right, of I failed, right? And then especially if it is an arranged marriage and it doesn't work out, then it's even more so that you don't want to talk about the person that was married into the family, right? They just don't exist anymore. Because that's happened to, you know, a couple of cousins of mine who, you know, got an arranged marriage, didn't work out. After 2 years, they got divorced. And it's like that wedding never happened. Like they'll be like, yeah, I remember we went to New Zealand for that trip. You know, it's like that was a wedding.
So the other part about talking about relationships too is that since we are not told things growing up, this is where the issue of consent comes into. Um, so I feel like I might have guesses as to what the answer this is, but like, what were all of you told around consent growing up?
Nothing, because we don't talk about that at all.
I could say same.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been told that either. Like, nothing about consent, really. Yeah. I think my parents would just be like questioning why I do things, and that's when I question a lot when I think of like consent. Like, is this a good idea? But like, not like, this is no, this is yes. Like, make sure you.
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, my mom, you know, jokingly but not jokingly was like, if you have sex, like bad things will happen. But also like not really talking about like things beyond that, right? Like just the physical. Um, and then, you know, I think I picked up very early on because like seeing my aunts kind of, some of my aunts were in like really abusive, like emotionally or financially or physically abusive relationships, and seeing how the rest of the family treated them, right? Like my aunts or my cousins, and there was never like, come, like we'll support you. It would be like, you can stay here for 2 days, but then you got to go back home. And it was never like there would be like, oh, you know, the men would sit around and be like, oh, like don't do this, don't act this way. But it would, you would be doing it over beers. Like how serious is the conversation, you know? And I just, I think as a child growing up, I never really, like it was very much like, you two are married, like sort out your business, don't put it in the streets. And that's, you know, I think that still applies to some of my family members. Like I still see family members in like really emotionally abusive relationships, and they're still together, you know, they end up having children, and it's it's just toxic. So I think for me, I never really got the verbal things, but I was definitely told, like, especially by my dad and my mom, that like no one can touch you, like you control that. But you know, again, just the physical aspect. And then I just kind of, but then the messages of what my family members were doing did not match. So I again got mixed messages, but nothing explicit.
So were you all like Oh, and then so for me, we never talked about either. So same. Um, growing up, I'm curious, were you all like, um, did you all? I think somebody mentioned fear, um, and being afraid of your dad. I think, you know, um, similarly, I think for a lot of men, like we were raised to be afraid of our dads as well. Were you all ever in a position where you felt like you couldn't tell your parents something out of fear?
I would say yes, definitely, for sure, no doubt. My mom definitely internalized a lot of those feelings of like failure with, you know, my periods. So like instead of telling me what my partner should be like, she told me what I should be like. She told me you need to learn how to cook because in the future that's what your husband expects of you. You need to learn how to clean because that's what's expected of you. You need to learn how to respect your elders because you need to respect your future mother and father-in-law. So like when I did things that didn't fit like that perfect picture of the person she wanted me to be and the person she wanted me to like show to everyone, I would just be like, didn't happen. Like she would tell me there's like this, I don't know, this metaphor, at least that she would always tell me. She'd be like, a girl's reputation is like a white dupatta, which is like a scarf. And she was like, if you ever ruin it, if you ever get dogs on it, which is like dirt or something, you can never fix it. It will never wash out. So that was like the model I was raised with.
For me, like my mom always is kind of like the coolest auntie you'll ever meet. Like you can kind of tell anything, and she's like whatever about it. So most of the things I do tell my mom too, but if I tell them both, I wouldn't like ever. But if it's like boys or anything, and if they really did something, then I usually tell my mom. Yeah.
I think for me, like my mom told me that like she didn't know, like she's the middle child, and so she kind of got away with not like having to learn how to cook and clean because her two older sisters had that responsibility, and then she's really close in age with one of her brothers, um, and then the youngest brother is like much younger, and so she like her being in the middle, she was never really like there's pictures of like her sisters like like cutting vegetables or whatever, and she's like in the corner reading, and there's like pictures of her like reading up in a mango tree and stuff like that. Like she kind of like got to be free of those responsibilities. So she told me that like the first time that she went, like after she got married, she went to her like in-laws home. Like part of this tradition, I guess, is the new bride has to make a dessert dish, um, and she had no idea how to make halwa, I think is what she tried to make, and she had no idea how to. So would she figured out though, like if she asked her sister-in-law, like, so my mom does it this way, how do you do it here? And that's how she kind of like faked her way into making a Indian dessert, that like first like traditional thing. And it's when she told me that, I think my parents, I think, break the mold in a lot of the ways, and they still uphold tradition in a lot of the ways. um so it's I don't know, like you get messages, but you also like see that the reality just doesn't match.
Yeah, totally. I mean, of course, mixed messages is a big part of growing up. You're told one thing, you have to act a totally different way, or vice versa. For me, I think, you know, at the age that I am now, where I have a lot of friends and family members who have kids and have kids, have had kids for a number of years now, right? So a lot of my friends and family members don't just have kids, but they now have like preteens. They're like they're like 10, and you're like, oh wow, I'm old. Everyone's old. But One of the things I've noticed is that, and this isn't an original thought. This is I just want to say, like, this has been talked about in various places, and there are a lot of critiques about it. So it's not like I'm like, oh my god, I'm the first person who knows this. But like, for fathers, particularly fathers towards their daughters, there's this feeling of overprotectiveness around their love lives, right? And like, even in a joking manner, it starts really, really young, right? It starts like almost before someone's born. And like, I have seen friends and family members, even before their daughters are born, will say stuff like, oh, she better not bring home a boy, like, or like, oh, like, she like, she better, whatever, right? And it's kind of like a joke, right? Like, obviously, if someone before someone's born, they're obviously not trying to start relationships. Um, but even in a joking manner, like, if that message persists, like, it leads to kids being afraid to tell their parents, like, the truth of what they're going through, whether and it's not always negative stuff. It could be super positive stuff, like, oh, I find this guy like super attractive and I just don't know what to do with my crush. Like, stuff like that is like, if the only messages you've given your kid is that if she brings home a guy, then like she'll be in trouble, then like of course she's never going to tell you when she likes a guy, right? Like, if the only message that you've given your daughter is that like any guy she brings home is going to be like scrutinized and criticized and questioned, then of course she's never going to tell you when she's in a relationship, right? And once you close the door to that, like, she's never going to tell you like when she needs help, right?
Right. And it's contrasted by what fathers say to their son. And then when you see it, right, like the way my brother, who's 10 years younger than me, gets kind of the like the jokes around like, oh, I'm sure you're pulling all the girls, right? And getting that at a very young age, it's like, well, you were just like, if you do it, you're in trouble. But with him, it's like a joke. It's like the expectation almost, right? And it's like, make it make sense. Like, why? Why do we do this? Did we lose Jeannie?
Yeah, so Jeannie had to bail for an appointment, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, so no worries. So we were going to try to talk about beauty standards in this one too, but we did use up a lot of our time with this topic. So I'm thinking maybe next week we'll do a part 2 where we talk about beauty standards, and like we'll have a chance to talk about all the different dumb stuff that we've done to each other around that. So knowing that that's coming up next week, putting that off to the side for now, and like just wrapping up this week, like, now that everybody is old enough to be held responsible for their own actions, like, I guess just looking for a space for folks who can give advice to their younger selves or to other people who might be going through something and feeling like they're the only ones going through it, or that other people don't understand. Like, what sort of advice would you give folks around relationships?
I'm not the one to ask, to be honest. I have no experience or no real experience, so.
But I think, Parl, for you, like, even if you haven't had your own experience, I think one of the things that you can tell people, though, is that, like, they're not alone, right? Like
Yeah.
they just because they haven't had relationships either doesn't mean that everyone else has, right?
Okay, I got it. I guess, like, yeah, that, don't let anybody gaslight you, and don't stay in a situation where you're not valued, no matter how much you like the person.
That is solid advice. Anoop, did you want to go next?
Okay. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I did a lot of dumb shit. I would just tell myself, like, calm down. I always tell myself to calm down because I feel like I get riled over everything. But just like to my younger self or to people who are in like relationships, just calm down. And also prioritize yourself. I feel like people always are like, my partner this, my partner that. Fuck that. Like do yourself, and then also don't expect your partner to pay for everything. Try to be like your own independent self. Do like if that's your vibe, then go for it. But then also like I don't know. I just value independence over everything.
Chris, did you want to go next?
Sure. I would say communicate would be my one advice. Like, talk about everything. Like, don't take anything for granted. Don't assume that everyone knows anything. Like, talk about everything. Talk about your expectations. Talk about your boundaries. Talk about what you're okay with. Talk about what you're not okay with. If you have dumb thoughts about dumb things, just tell them. Like, I think like, you know, the worst things that we do to each other in terms of relationships are like, not the worst things, one of the worst things. There are other things that are even worse, but one of the worst things that we do to each other about relationships is that we don't tell people what we're thinking, and we don't tell people what we expect, and we then sit back and watch things fall apart because nobody knew, right? Like just tell them.
Yeah, I think for me, all of what you said, like all of what y'all said, totally like I was like, yes, I've done that. Yep, totally need to remember that. For folks who are dating, right, and are like actively trying to find someone and like aspire to get married, I would just say, make choices that align with who you see yourself in the future, right? Don't make choices based on what you want now. um, and then, if you're dating and you're getting heartbroken, right, like that heartbreak, it sucks. Like, feel it, like, and take the lessons from it, right? Because it's so easy to just be like, oh, dating sucks, like fuck this shit, and then just like give up, and then like take it, internalize it, and just like let it kind of continue on to the next relationship that you're trying to establish. And so, that those heartbreaks that you feel, that like that pain, that like frustration in yourself, like really use that time to reflect. And I think, like, Anoop, like your mom, I agree, like I wish I had been single more. I wish I had like, taken the time to explore like who I am, what I am, what makes me me. Like I focused on education, but like I didn't get that message, and I think that's what your mom might have been trying to like say. So yeah.
Cool. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today for another episode of Keeping Up with APIDA. I think this was really awesome. Great conversation. Hopefully, folks who are watching this got stuff out of it, and hopefully, we all got stuff out of it from each other. I know I did.
Yeah.
So
also, tell us your advice. What
yeah.
advice would you give your younger self? What advice, as you're entering college or are in college, like what advice would you give to your fellow Spartans or college students?
For sure. Yeah. Feel free to comment on Instagram and stuff. Like, we want to see them.
Mm-hmm.
And then next week we're going to be talking about beauty standards and how we look at each other, I guess. I was trying to think of a more clever way of saying that, and I couldn't. Okay. So thank you, everybody, and have a good day.
Bye.